This isn't a daycare. Why is there a little girl in the control tower? That's what an airman snapped just minutes before a training jet vanished from radar, mid-flight, in the middle of a storm. They chuckled when 12-year-old Amelia Carter quietly scribbled in her notebook. They rolled their eyes when she asked to listen in on the pilot radio frequencies. They never imagined what she was about to do. Because when chaos erupted, when the radar screens went dark, when grown men panicked and lost contact with the jet, the little girl in the control tower stood up and took command. With a steady voice and flawless instructions, she brought that military aircraft down safely and calmly. What happened next left an entire Air Force unit speechless and turned a quiet girl with a notebook into a national symbol of courage and skill. Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing our global community light up the comments. And if this story touches your heart, don't forget to hit subscribe, because we believe age should never define greatness. Let's get started. At a remote Air Force base tucked into the hills of Montana, 12-year-old Amelia Carter wasn't spending her afternoons like most kids her age, while others played games or scrolled through phones. Amelia climbed the narrow spiral staircase to the control tower where her father, Jack Carter, worked as a senior air traffic controller. He called it their silent hour, a time when Amelia would quietly observe, her notebook always in hand, her eyes never missing a movement on the radar screens. Amelia wasn't interested in dolls or school gossip. Her world revolved around flight paths, call signs, and approach patterns. She memorized aviation manuals for fun, practiced radio lingo with old walkie-talkies, and could mimic emergency landing sequences using paper planes and simulation software. Most on base admired her dedication except Staff Sergeant Ryan Blake, a seasoned airman and former flight instructor. To him, Amelia was nothing more than a distraction. A kid in the control tower. "What is this? Bring your daughter to work day," he scoffed one afternoon, rolling his eyes in front of the crew. Amelia heard it. She didn't flinch, just smiled, and kept writing because she knew something no one else did. Her moment to prove it was coming. One hazy Tuesday afternoon, a sudden alert blared through the intercom of Granite Ridge Air Base. The skies above Montana were changing rapidly, thick clouds rolling in faster than expected. A surprise training flight had been scheduled with limited staff, as several technicians were out on rotation. The tension in the control tower spiked. Staff Sergeant Ryan Blake was assigned to supervise the tower during the drill. Though experienced, even he showed signs of unease as weather updates grew grimmer. A low-pressure system was closing in, and visibility on radar had begun to flicker. Amelia sat quietly in her usual corner behind the glass, her pencil moving swiftly across the page. She was logging every command, every frequency, every anomaly. She didn't say a word until Ryan turned toward her with a smirk that barely masked his nerves. "Well, Amelia, maybe that little notebook of yours can save us today." "Huh," he muttered, half joking, half bitter. The room chuckled uneasily. Without skipping a beat, Amelia looked up and replied gently, "Only if you're willing to listen." The laughter stopped. Silence followed, long, awkward, almost electric. Ryan blinked, caught off guard by the confidence in her voice. The radar technician next to him shot a glance his way. The tower, moments ago, buzzing with routine commands, seemed to hold its breath. Jack Carter, Amelia's father, looked over from his console. He opened his mouth to speak, but paused. He had heard that tone in his daughter's voice before, calm, certain, and focused. It was the same tone she used when correcting aircraft specs at the breakfast table or reciting radio procedures from memory. Outside, the wind howled louder. A voice from one of the pilots crackled through. There was uncertainty in his words. Visibility was dropping faster than anticipated. And suddenly, one of the aircraft, a T-6 Texan II trainer, missed a check-in. Radar showed a delayed ping. The aircraft's blip on the screen began to shimmer and jump. Then it vanished. "Lost comms with Bravo 1, the technician announced. No GPS relay." Panic simmered beneath the surface. Ryan stood frozen. His hands hovered over the panel, but he didn't act. Protocols blurred in his mind. He was trained for this, but something about the situation felt off script. And then, from the back of the room, a chair scraped. Amelia stood up. Her voice was low but carried weight. "That's a VFR flight going IMC. I know what to do, if you let me use the radio." Ryan turned. Jack stiffened. Another technician glanced at the clock. Seconds were ticking away. "You're 12?" Ryan said slowly. Amelia met his gaze. 12. Yes, but I've practiced this situation over 100 times on simulators in my head, even in this tower. You want Bravo 1 down safe. Let me try. That was the moment everything changed. The tension in the control tower was thick as fog. Outside, the storm raged low visibility, swirling winds, and the chilling uncertainty of a missing aircraft. Everyone stared at the dark radar screen, waiting for a signal that wasn't coming. Bravo 1! The T-6 Texan II was no longer responding. The young pilot, second-year trainee Lieutenant Cody Ramirez, had lost both radio contact and visual bearings. He was flying blind through dense Montana clouds, completely disoriented, dangerously low on fuel, and drifting off course. Staff Sergeant Ryan Blake stood frozen, staring blankly at the console. His years of training couldn't prepare him for the terrifying silence now swallowing the tower. Even the backup systems failed to re-establish contact. The fear in the room was unspoken, but palpable. No one moved. And then, like a switch flipping, Amelia Carter stepped forward. She didn't wait for permission this time. "I need access to comms now," she said firmly. Jack Carter turned slowly, hesitating only for a second before nodding to the technician beside him. "Patch her in." Ryan's mouth opened to protest, but Jack raised his hand. "She knows what she's doing." The room held its breath. Amelia put on the headset. Her fingers danced across the panel, inputting the exact emergency frequency and radio protocol with robotic precision. "This is Granite Ridge Tower to Bravo 1. Do you copy? I repeat. Bravo 1, this is Tower, do you copy?" Static. Then faint, broken, but unmistakably a voice. "I think I'm south of the ridge. I can't see a thing. Low on fuel." Amelia leaned in, her tone sharp and calm. "Lieutenant Ramirez, you're currently VFR and IMC. I'm your guide now. Maintain current heading for 15 seconds, then bank 20 degrees east. Keep throttle steady. I've got you." The pilot hesitated, then answered, Who is this?" "Name's Amelia. Don't worry about that right now. Just fly. I've got your eyes." Her voice, though young, held the authority of someone far beyond her years. One by one, she relayed heading adjustments, altitude corrections, and airspeed calibrations. She compensated for wind drift using real-time weather patterns she'd memorized and cross-checked with tower data. The tower watched in awe. Even Ryan, who once mocked her presence, was now silently pacing behind her like a nervous student. Minute by minute, Amelia painted a flight path out of chaos, guiding a nearly lost pilot through a needle-threading descent between two ridgelines only she seemed to fully grasp. Then, through the thick cloud cover, the faint glimmer of landing lights appeared on the outer camera feed. "He's on approach," one of the technicians whispered. "Adjust pitch 5 degrees. You're 200 feet above glide slope. You're doing great," Amelia coached. And then touchdown. The wheels hit the tarmac, brakes engaged, the aircraft slowed to a halt. A collective exhale swept through the room. Amelia removed the headset, her hands still steady. She looked around the silent room, then sat back down in her chair. Notebook open. The girl who wasn't supposed to belong in the tower had just landed a jet. The only sound in the tower was the hum of the monitors and the slow release of breath from stunned technicians. No one cheered, no one moved. It wasn't because they didn't want to, it was because they couldn't. What had just happened didn't feel real. Staff Sergeant Ryan Blake stood rigid, eyes fixed on the monitor replaying the safe landing of Bravo 1. Just 15 minutes earlier, he had ridiculed a child. Now, that same child had guided a military aircraft through an emergency landing with grace, composure, and a command of aviation that most rookies didn't learn in years. He slowly turned to look at Amelia Carter, who had gone back to her corner, quietly jotting down notes in her notebook as if nothing had happened. The tension cracked as Lieutenant Ramirez's voice buzzed through the speaker tower. "This is Bravo 1. Just wanted to say, whoever got me down, thank you." That voice, it was like a lighthouse in a hurricane. The room erupted not in chaos, but in applause. A wave of spontaneous, heartfelt clapping filled the control tower. Several staff members had tears in their eyes. Others stood in silent admiration. Jack Carter looked at his daughter, his heart swelling with pride, his eyes glistening. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Then came the moment no one expected. Ryan Blake walked over, his military boots echoing on the tile. He stopped directly in front of Amelia. No smugness, no sarcasm, just a changed man. He stood tall, then lifted his hand in a crisp salute. "Permission to apologize, ma'am." Amelia looked up, stunned for a second. She didn't speak. Instead, she reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded certificate. Without saying a word, she handed it to Ryan. He unfolded it slowly. Civil Aviation Youth Training Program, Honors Graduate. Completed at age 10. Ryan stared at the paper, then back at her. His expression shifted from shame to awe. "I never should have doubted you," he said, voice low. "That's okay," Amelia replied softly. "Sometimes you have to doubt the sky before you learn how to fly through it." More applause, this time louder. From that day forward, no one ever questioned why Amelia Carter was in that control tower. She belonged there every bit as much as the radars, the screens, and the voices that guided planes through stormy skies. What Ryan had once mocked, he now championed. And what Amelia had once quietly loved, she now confidently embodied. 1 year later, the once quiet Granite Ridge Air Base looked different. A new wing had been added to the facility glass walls, training rooms, mock control stations, and a sign in bold silver letters. The Amelia Carter Flight Initiative. What had started as a simple moment, a child guiding a jet to safety, had evolved into a national conversation about youth in aviation, talent beyond age, and the limits we place on potential. Thanks to a proposal co-signed by Jack Carter and supported fiercely by Staff Sergeant Ryan Blake. The Air Force greenlit a pioneering mentorship program at Granite Ridge, an academy designed for teenagers with a passion for aviation, air traffic control, and flight logistics. They called it Flight Path, and Amelia's name became its heart. Every Saturday morning, the control tower buzzed with the voices of young cadets, some just 11 or 12 years old, learning how to decode radar, simulate landings, and communicate over real radio frequencies. The same space that once doubted a young girl now championed dozens like her. Amelia, now 13, didn't act like a celebrity. She wore her headset, took notes like always, and tutored students between simulations. But when one nervous new student asked how she wasn't scared the day she landed the plane, she smiled. "I was scared," she admitted, "but I was more afraid of staying silent." Ryan Blake, now officially assigned as the program's lead mentor, stood in the back of the room that day, arms crossed, a proud grin hidden behind his mustache. No one had undergone a transformation quite like him. The same man who once rolled his eyes at a little girl in a control tower was now helping train them by the dozens. When asked why he dedicated himself to the Flight Path program, Ryan answered simply, "Because she reminded me that real leaders don't wait for rank to do the right thing." The local news picked up the story. Then national outlets followed. Soon, bases across the country began requesting the curriculum. Parents flew in from out of state to enroll their kids. What started with one child's act of courage turned into a movement, the Youth Aviation Initiative, sweeping across the nation. And through it all, Amelia stayed grounded figuratively and literally. When a journalist asked what she wanted to do in the future, her answer went viral. "I'm not waiting for the future to find me," she said. "I'm flying toward it." Those words now hung in the entrance hall of the program building, a reminder to every student, every airman, every skeptic that brilliance doesn't come with age. It comes with belief. And in Amelia's case, belief had taken flight. As the seasons changed over Granite Ridge, so did Amelia Carter. Gone was the shy girl tucked in the corner of the control tower, sketching flight paths in a worn notebook. In her place stood a confident, articulate teen, still soft-spoken, but now unmistakably a leader. At just 13, Amelia wasn't just participating in the flight path program, she was shaping it. New students, many of whom had never even set foot in a tower, looked to her with awe. To them, she wasn't just a prodigy, she was proof that age couldn't hold back ability. And Amelia embraced that responsibility, not with arrogance, but with quiet resolve. She arrived early. She stayed late. She wrote custom practice scenarios for her peers, each tailored to their learning style. When someone failed a simulation, she didn't correct them with authority. She asked questions, helped them think through the problem, then guided them with patience and humility. Even seasoned airmen like Ryan Blake now sought her opinion. He often brought her into staff briefings not as a gesture, but because her insight had become invaluable. Once resistant, Ryan had transformed into her strongest supporter. He often told others, "She doesn't just think like a controller, she thinks like a commander." Still, Amelia stayed grounded. She insisted on participating in drills like everyone else. She got nervous before evaluations. She had doubts on hard days. But instead of hiding them, she shared them with her peers, creating an environment where vulnerability and learning went hand in hand. Outside the tower, Amelia also began speaking publicly. She delivered a keynote at a youth aviation summit in Colorado, where she told her story not as a miracle, but as a moment of preparation meeting opportunity. "I didn't land that jet because I'm a genius," she said. "I landed it because I practiced, because I listened, because I believed that one day I might be needed. And when that day came, I was ready." The audience gave her a standing ovation. Her story resonated across industries, not just aviation, schools, tech firms, even medical training programs cited her approach: foster curiosity early, respect young minds, and never underestimate the power of preparation. Back at Granite Ridge, Amelia walked the halls of the flight path building like a pilot walks her hangar, proud, prepared, but always scanning for improvement. When she overheard someone refer to her as just a kid, she simply smiled. She didn't need to correct them. Her presence did that on its own. She had grown not just in skill, but in purpose. She understood now that her gift wasn't only in guiding planes, but in guiding people. And as more students enrolled each season, many from underserved communities, she made sure they knew they weren't alone, and they weren't too young to lead. Because Amelia Carter wasn't waiting for permission. She was clearing the runway for everyone else to fly. The sun dipped behind the Montana hills, casting a golden hue over Granite Ridge Air Base. The control tower stood tall against the sky, once just a background for Amelia Carter's quiet passion, now a monument to possibility. Inside, the final group of flight path cadets were packing up after a long simulation. As the last student left, Amelia remained, standing by the observation window, gazing at the runway, the same one where, just a year earlier, a jet had landed through fog and chaos, guided by a voice no one expected to matter. A soft knock on the glass door behind her. Ryan Blake stepped in, hands in his pockets. "Thought I'd find you here," he said. She turned, smiling. Old habits. Ryan walked beside her, watching the runway lights blink one by one. "Tomorrow's the first national rollout of the flight path program," he said. 37 bases, thousands of kids, all because of what you did. Amelia shook her head. No, because people believed it could be more than just a story. He nodded. Maybe, but it started with you. There was a pause. Then Ryan pulled something from his jacket, a small bronze plaque. He handed it to her. For redefining readiness, Amelia Carter, Tower 4, June 3rd, 1642. It was the exact date and time she landed Bravo 1. Her hands trembled as she read it. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You already did. Ryan said, that day, you said you weren't waiting for the future to find you. You were flying toward it. They stood there in silence, both watching as a single trainer jet took off in the distance, soaring high against the fading light. That evening, news broke nationwide. The Amelia Carter Flight Initiative would become a national model, sponsored by both military and civilian aviation groups. A movement had begun where children were seen not as bystanders, but as emerging voices of brilliance. Amelia never let it go to her head. She continued studying. She took part-time courses in meteorology. She volunteered at a local aviation museum, teaching 5-year-olds how to make paper gliders and explaining lift and drag like it was magic. Because to her, it still was. When asked years later by a documentary crew what she remembered most about that emergency landing, she didn't mention the applause or the headlines. She said, I remember the silence before I spoke and how it ended the moment someone listened. Amelia taught the world that age is not the barrier to greatness. Doubt is. And she didn't just break through that doubt. She flew right through it, leaving a trail for others to follow. Anyone can take control of the tower if they prepare for the moment no one else sees coming. As the wind settled over the Granite Ridge runway, Amelia Carter flipped to a fresh page in her weathered notebook, not to log flight data, but to sketch out a new lesson plan. This time, it wasn't for herself. It was for every kid who had ever been told, "You're too young," or "You don't belong." Now they'd hear something different. "You're ready. Let's begin." Because the dream that once sat quietly beside her in the tower had grown louder, strong enough to echo across bases, classrooms, and hearts. It wasn't just Amelia's anymore. It belonged to every overlooked child, every underestimated dreamer, every future pilot no one saw coming. The girl they once scoffed at had become the voice that brought a jet home. Now she's clearing the runway for the next in line. And for Amelia and everyone following her flight path, the tower wasn't the final destination. It was just the takeoff point. The end? Up next, 2 more powerful true stories that will lift your spirit. Click to keep flying with us and hit subscribe if you believe voices of courage deserve to be heard.